Recent research reveals racism and prejudice in Britain is increasing.
There's extremism down there. There's Taliban down the island. And I'm not just saying that, there is. It's been proven. Police know they're there.
Rise in UKIP popularity sees a push towards anti-immigration sentiment amongst political parties.
If immigrant communities over a period of time learn the language, they must come to accept British values, British laws.
According to the survey, people's perceptions of what it means to be British have become stricter over time.
The whole Britishness debate is actually madness. It's actually quite nonsensical. There is no definition of what it means to be British.
It's quite funny when you hear some white people will say to you, oh, go F off, go back to your own country. I'm in my country, I was born here, I was raised here.
In this InFocus, we ask, is Britain's changing attitude towards immigration making more and more people feel unwelcome?
The British Social Attitude Survey has found that the number of people who consider themselves to be racially prejudiced in the UK is on the rise. Now this, combined with increasing anti-immigration sentiments and Islamophobia, has experts worrying that community relations are at risk of being damaged.
35% of people in the West Midlands would describe themselves as having some form of racial prejudice, whereas in London, the figure is lower at 16%. So we decided to travel to the multicultural city of Birmingham to see why this is the case. First stop was Alam Rock, an area heavily inhabited by the Pakistani community. We wanted to speak to the English residents to see what it's like for them living in this neighbourhood. We went to the local social club, but found many were reluctant to speak on camera, so we decided to film them secretly.
Excuse me, can I speak to Nikki? It's Faiza, how are you? Nice to meet you.
The local white population is mainly of working class origin. Many of whom I spoke to felt there were no-go areas in Birmingham for them after a certain time.
I still live in the area, so you have to watch. It.
So if you did speak on camera, what do you think would happen?
I'm not speaking on camera. It'd be the local community round. If they ever got noticed, there'd be trouble. You don't realise just how hard line it is in Alam Rock there. There's extremism down there. There's Taliban down the Alam Rock. And I'm not just saying that, there is. It's been proven. Police know they're there.
According to the City Council's website, Birmingham's residents are from a wide range of national, ethnic and religious backgrounds. Pakistanis and Indians make up a large proportion of this, and this trend has been growing since 2001.
The Asian community come in and they basically colonised areas where we used to live, and then the tentacles keep moving. And it's spreading.
Yeah, because the coloniser altogether, it forces you out the area. You are being forced out. It's one way or another.
Overseas migrants arriving between the 1950s and the 1980s were mainly from the Indian subcontinent and the Caribbean. So despite them being here for decades, why are negative sentiments towards them so strong? I went to meet immigration expert Charles Kelly to find out.
Part of it is the economy, part of it is the sort of rise of UKIP. You know, you've got the Daily Mail headlines every other day. This one here is soaring immigration sparks British baby boom. And you know, people could see that the hospitals are overstretched. And I think anti-immigration sentiment is probably more prevalent amongst the white working class, who feel a little bit marginalised by the amount of immigrants in their communities. And particularly if you're in a community where there's not many jobs anyway, and then they see people coming in from Eastern Europe undercutting them, you know, they're the ones who feel more marginalised, and they're probably the ones who are more likely to vote UKIP.
It's not just the local white population who feel they need to tread carefully in certain parts of Birmingham. From talking to 22-year-old Abdul Wahid, it appears the local Asian residents also feel the same.
Like you mentioned, Billesley, Kings Norton, these areas are predominantly white areas. And then you have Alam Rock, Sparkhill, these areas are predominantly Asian. For example, a family member, he lives in Billesley, and one time he wanted to go to the corner shop just round the corner from his house, and he was going to change his clothes because he didn't want to be seen as a Muslim, because in case he received some racist abuse, which is a bit upsetting, to be honest with you. And yeah, when you go into those areas, you do have to be cautious, you know, because unfortunately racism there is more high than in other areas in Birmingham.
Muslims make up approximately 21% of Birmingham's population. But since the killing of Lee Rigby and events in Syria, reports have surfaced of Muslims in the area feeling very uneasy. Though Keith Rowe from UKIP doesn't feel this to be the case.
I have to say I haven't experienced that in Birmingham. I've lived in Birmingham and around this area all of my life. And when I go to areas that are predominantly Muslim and the Indian restaurants are completely integrated and people go and visit them, I never feel, or I don't recall ever feeling threatened in that way.
But the opinions of locals contradict what he said.
You don't wish to categorise it, but it's the Muslim people that tend to keep themselves to themselves. They don't mix. The Indian man they'll come out and they will come out. Well, it's just the threat of violence on the street. You know, you've seen the soldier, yeah, down in London, they chopped him up.
Why does a Muslim man want to rule the world? Why does he want to take over?
Global events have shaped people's perceptions of Muslims. According to research findings, the attitude towards Muslims is far worse today than it was right after 9/11.
From my experience since 9/11, since these so-called terrorist attacks, the war and all the wars that have happened, in Iraq, Afghanistan and everything, and even after the 7/7 attacks, racism towards Muslims has increased by a lot. I mean, even the Sikhs, the Hindus, just because they're Asian and people may mistake them for a Muslim, they'll get attacked just because of the way they look. And definitely, I mean, everyone can agree on that. I mean, even white people will agree on that Muslims get attacked on the most.
Some commentators have said many sections of the British press have not helped the situation by publishing stories about Muslims that would never be published about any other minority group.
I love America. America are my friends. Americans don't want to kill me. Muslims want to kill me. Americans don't. And I don't think Americans are going to kill their own people. We can't do nothing without America.
What impact is this kind of hostility having on communities? I went to meet local businessman Nasir Awan, who runs a third-generation company employing both ethnic minorities and English workers.
The atmosphere definitely could be better, could be a lot more friendlier, but I think the media and the politicians need to play their part on that. We are doing our level best to reach out to the community, but it's the indigenous community, the white English people, that needs to reciprocate and reach out to us. I don't think our doors are closed, our doors are open, but they're not taking the opportunity. Now, they say is maybe we're not integrating from a Muslim perspective. Okay, I won't, I don't go into a pub, I won't drink a pint of beer with them. If that's integrating, that's not me. I have principles. I wouldn't go into a restaurant and have pork or meat. I would like my halal meat. It's available. So am I not integrating? No, I'm sticking to my principles. But I'm not telling them that their principles are wrong. But they're more than welcome to come and sit with me. I mean, I do go into restaurants, I go to business dinners where people are drinking, they're having pork. but that place is not within my control.
I'm not sure what they mean by integrate, because do they come down the pub with me? Well, probably not. Do they mean do they go to a football match? Well, yes and no. If you go to an average event in a town, let's say you go to a charity function or a quiz night or something, it's a very small group of people that actually go out and do anything. The rest of the people stay at home and watch EastEnders. So what are they talking about when they mean integration? I'm not quite sure what they mean by that. Do they dress like them? No, they have their own way of dressing. But when people say they're not integrating, I think that's a bit of a cop-out, because certainly their children would integrate. They would grow up in a school, in a primary school with other children, and they would be like the other children.
Though hostilities are prevalent amongst the elder generation, it appears the younger members of the community are trying to integrate. We met a group of local youths working on a community project to see what they thought.
So do you think there's more of a problem with the older community, with the older members of the community, than it is with the youngsters when it comes to integration? Because you're all from different backgrounds and you're working together on a community project.
I'd like to think so, because as you say, we're all from different backgrounds and we all get along, and it's like you don't just go off face value, do you? You get to know somebody, and then it's someone's personality and the traits.
I think young people, it is easier for young people to integrate because we've been connected through social networking websites and whatnot, whereas traditionally old people, the way you get to communicate is face to face, and sometimes you can't see past what the person looks like, whereas with us now we've got loads of different ways to communicate.
According to the ONS, 560,000 people immigrated to the UK in the year ending March 2014, a significant increase from 492,000 in the previous 12 months. Two-thirds of the increase was accounted for by immigration of EU citizens.
Immigration has drastically changed many boroughs. For instance, many high streets have now taken on new identities as immigrant traders set up shops to cater to the various groups living within a community.
Areas which were run down, actually, there's an area here called Balsall Heath or Sparkbrook, where at the beginning of that road there must have been 40 or 50 shops which are derelict. Even the Indians or the Pakistanis didn't really want them. These Somalis have come in and they were really dirt cheap, and they've gone in, they worked hard, and they brought that area back up, and now there's a very thriving Somali community there.
As the civil war raged in Somalia, a number of refugees arrived in Britain in the 90s. In 1999, 7,495 Somalis had arrived. According to the 2011 census, approximately 100,000 people in England and Wales were born in Somalia, and as a result, the number of Somali businesses in the UK is increasing. But despite this, the locals' view of the Somali community is still somewhat tainted.
Somali people are lawless people, they're violent people by their nature. The country's lawless. I mean, how they get over here, and they say there is no money over there, but they get over here. It's drugs money, obviously. Yeah. And that's what they're dealing. They're not working. They're not. So where are they getting the money from?
According to the Centre for Entrepreneurs think tank, migrant entrepreneurs are responsible for creating over 1.1 million jobs in Britain. Experts have also said overall immigration to the UK between 2001 and 2011 has provided a net contribution of about £25 billion.
I think if you go to any high street within where there's predominantly non-Asians or non-ethnic people, those high streets are dead, they're ghost towns. Because the nationals and the multinationals have actually taken over every business that you can think of, be it fruit, be it clothing, even as far as petrol is concerned. And had it not been for the migrant population, if you go into those areas, they've actually brought life back into those high streets. And unfortunately, if you go to the English areas, the high streets are dead. So yes, it has changed, but it's changed for the better. But they don't actually see that. And had those shops not been there, there'd be no shops for them to go and buy their fruits and vegetables that they want, because they would have to go to the nationals and the multinationals and the hypermarkets. Those people who've opened those shops selling exotic fruits and vegetables are there to provide a service for the local community, and that is what the demand is for.
But do locals think immigration is a drain or a gain to Britain? Do you think immigration has benefited Britain?
No, not at all. No. Years ago it's fine.
In the 50s when the West Indians came whatever, yes, we need the extra labour. Obviously for the
Too
war
much
and
immigration.
that benefited.
Recently, Defence Secretary Michael Fallon stated locals feel they are under siege and swamped by migrants. Jesmal, a care worker who arrived from the Philippines over 10 years ago, feels such remarks can create ill feelings.
Well, I feel really not happy with that, because as an immigrant, I've contributed a lot to this country. I've managed to, stay in this country from hard work. I have not taken any sort of benefits, from the government. Yeah, and I think the immigrants are the ones who's really been, helping a lot to make the economy of this country, go further. So I feel really upset, when I hear that sort of thing, that the immigrants are stealing their jobs, whatsoever. We have contributed a lot.
Research suggests 77% of voters want cuts to immigration, and 56% want it cut by a lot. Now, as a result, parties like UKIP, who are pushing an anti-immigration stance, are thriving in several towns across the UK. Do you feel that that's changed the way you would vote?
Oh, definitely.
We've got, I'll probably sound like a bloody racist here, but I'm actually not. Believe it or not, we've got good black friends, Muslim friends. But the other people that are coming now are like the Eastern Europeans, Romanians mainly, and they
are the lowest.
They don't want to. I don't know whether they want to work, but they want to pickpocket, they want to thief.
The rise of UKIP has led to the three main political parties toughening their stances on immigration. Many have accused UKIP of spreading a racist agenda, but Keith Rowe disagrees.
I've never heard or experienced any form of racism in my time in UKIP. It's not something I've heard. Yes, immigration is an issue, but it's not a question of a particular race, a particular creed, a particular religion, or a particular colour. It is to do with numbers, it is to do with the way we manage our services in this country, and in particular with UKIP. In fact, one of the main focuses of UKIP is to do with our relationship with the EU and with Europe. And it's certainly not a question of, you mentioned the Muslim community or any other particular community. It is to do with the fact that we have open borders and we can't control who comes in and out. But in terms of racism, it's not, and nobody's been able to tell me what race they think we're racist against, because I've never heard any sentiments like that.
According to the survey, people's perceptions of what it means to be British have become stricter over time.
If immigrant communities remain isolated and they don't learn the language, they don't get involved with society generally, that's not good for them and it's not good for everybody else. If immigrant communities over a period of time learn the language, they must come to accept British values, British laws.
Earlier this year, David Cameron triggered off the so-called British values debate. Many commentators have suggested the Prime Minister's comments could be seen as stoking xenophobia.
The whole Britishness debate is actually madness. It's actually quite nonsensical. There is no definition of what it means to be British. British for one person could simply be drinking cups of tea and then going out to see the monarch when she's on her parade, or it could be about having a red passport that gets you access past the airport queue. So this idea about Britishness being this quintessential, perfect, virtueness of it's quite madness. And again, like I was explaining, Scotland, if Scotland had actually become independent, there would be no longer any Britishness. So it's very difficult for someone like me to say that I'm British. I have British nationality, And I embrace that thoroughly. But am I a Briton? Well, no, I'm an African. And I have heritages that I'm a Yoruba man, Nigeria, I'm a Hackneyite. But I'm not quite British in the sense where you have the far-right parties appropriating the term to mean, you know, beer drink. I don't drink alcohol, so I don't go to the pub on a Friday night. So that aspect, that artificial aspect of British culture, I don't subscribe to, and many people don't subscribe to.
How British do those with ethnic minority backgrounds feel?
I'm personally proud to be British, and it's quite funny when you hear some like white people will say to you, oh, go F off, go back to your own country. I'm in my country, like I was born here, I was raised here, and you know, this country is beautiful. There are beautiful people out there, but obviously there's always going to be that minority or those group of people that, you know, will put you down and stuff. But I myself, I'm very proud to be British.
And does the rest of the community, say like the local English community, do they perceive you as being British, or do you still feel that even though you obviously, you know, you're a British citizen now, that you're still not fully seen as being British as such?
Yeah, sometimes you do see sometimes the colleagues, you know, although you say that, although I say I've gained my citizenship by naturalization, you know, but because your color is still different, you know, from theirs, you know, so they still see you as a foreigner.
So how can communities foster better relations?
Racism is something that shouldn't exist in the world. However, it does, and my personal opinion is it will always be here. Although it's like a disease that we want to get rid of, probably like cancer, that it's something bad, evil that we want to get rid of, but unfortunately at the moment there's no cure for it. However, we can take steps and we can reduce the amount of racism that there is out there. However, we do need to start making those steps.
What kind of steps do you think, you know, young people like yourselves can take?
Integrating with each other. I mean, like, you know, whereas when I went to school, the school I went to, it was always the Asians and the Pakistanis being with the Pakistanis and the whites being with the whites. However, if we mix in with each other, then that's when you realize that, hold on, these people ain't as bad as some people make them out to be. And it's down to either one side to actually make that first step. And once that first step isn't made, then we're always going to face this problem.
Many immigrant communities are taking such steps and attempting to reach out to the wider community. Eid One Festival in Luton is one such event designed to bring together the local Muslims and non-Muslims.
After September 11th and then 7/7, we started doing charity community projects everywhere in the country where we saw communities dividing and polarizing. We created things like this event to bring them together again. We're in Stockwood Park in front of Farley Hill, where EDL was born. And since we launched here about 4 or 5 years ago, we've done phenomenal work. People have really merged, and it's of a lot more community cohesion.
I think they've integrated, from my area particularly, they've integrated really well. They've obviously integrated here from what I can see in just 4 days of being here. As I say, there's no problems, nothing, no dissent anywhere. Everybody just coming together and enjoying the event for what it is.
We every year spread out leaflets in these neighborhoods, and we make the choice to bring out people who are either covered or bearded to try to get them to interact with these communities. And there's not a day goes by where they don't get some kind of racial comment. But they actually go in. Our aim is to receive the frustrations, receive the negative energy, and return it in a positive way.